Thank you to our steeple ringers and to their director, Janet Carter. This faithful group of folks practices every Monday night. This is our ecumenical arm of our congregation, right? Because we partner with St. Mark's and we share this wonderful group. And so they not only play for us and for St. Mark's, but also they're going to be playing at some bell festivals this summer. And so you'll see them again soon. So I'm glad they were here to help us celebrate Earth Day on this third Sunday of our Creation Care sermon series. And this week, preparing for this sermon brought back a really precious memory for me. Several years ago, I was on a kindergarten field trip with about 100 5- and 6-year-olds. And we were at the University of Missouri in the planetarium in Columbia. And we were nearing the end of our time at the planetarium, and the scientist leading this group of inquisitive 5- and 6-year-olds through space and time explained he would take one final question. Up shot the arm of Jacob Steitz. And he called on Jacob, and Jake said, "This has been really cool, but what I want to know is, now where did we humans come from?" Several heads of other mothers in the room spun towards the preacher as the preacher's child spoke. And the scientist leading the group beautifully explained to this budding young astronomer how millions and billions of years ago, there was this huge explosion. And after the dust settled and cooled, our planet was made out of this big bang. And at the end of his overly simplistic explanation to these 5-year-olds, he said, "And humans, we are made of stardust." Isn't that cool? Jake smiled and nodded. Jake's mama smiled and nodded. Other mamas in the room, not so much. Some of these mamas weren't quite sure about the explanation given to my beloved 6-year-old. And I think maybe because they had this story that Bill read from the 2nd chapter of Genesis deeply entrenched in their minds. And maybe some of you do too. And sometimes we just quite can't make it fit. This explanation of science and the understandings of our faith. But that moment for me was so liberating. I never doubted the science. I never doubted the science. And believing in the science never made me doubt my faith either. I somehow knew that they had to be connected. I'd just never quite been able to come up with the words to explain it. But in that moment, on a kindergarten field trip, it began to take shape for me. You see, I think when we think of ourselves as being made of stardust and not just the clay of the earth, the science can somehow feel like it's not quite in opposition to our faith. Just like I don't think that the two creation stories have to be oppositional. Sometimes people try to separate out the first chapter and the creation story there that we read a couple of weeks ago from this different one here. And certainly, they each tell a unique story of how the Creator fashioned creation. But together, we gain a fuller understanding of who we are and who we are called to be. story 1 from the first chapter of Genesis, reminds us that we are created in the divine image of God, and our call to care for the earth and all of its inhabitants comes from that divine responsibility of being God's emissaries here. In story 2 that we heard this morning, we are created out of dirt. The exact opposite of being divine. We are ordinary. Ordinary dirt and not divine at all. But if we begin to think about the ordinary dirt and clay of the earth not being dirty, ordinary dirt, but wonderful, extraordinary star stuff, well, let's let my friend Neil deGrasse Tyson explain. Now, do you know Neil deGrasse Tyson? Please, God, somebody shake their head. Yes, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you in the back. If you do not know Neil deGrasse Tyson, he is sort of, well, he's an astrophysicist, and he's like the rock star of the scientific world, right? And he's not only cool, but he can explain really complicated astrophysics stuff to people like me who are not astrophysicists, right? He can explain it in a way that I can understand. And in this video that I'm about to show you, Neil deGrasse Tyson is explaining Carl Sagan's famous line, "We are made of star stuff." Let's see if this plays.
Recognize that the very molecules that make up your body, the atoms that construct the molecules, are traceable to the crucibles that were once the centers of high-mass stars, that exploded their chemically enriched guts into the galaxy, enriching pristine gas clouds with the chemistry of life, so that we're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, and to the rest of the universe atomically. That's kind of cool. That makes me smile. And I actually feel quite large at the end of that. It's not that we are better than the universe, we're part of the universe. We're in the universe, and the universe is in us.
I love this line, that these high-mass stars exploded their chemically enriched guts out into the galaxy, creating the chemistry of life so that we are all connected. I love when he says it is not that we are better than the universe, we are a part of the universe. We are the universe, and the universe is in us. And when I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say that on my television a couple of years ago, I shouted into the living room, "That'll preach." Because if God did indeed make us out of cosmic dirt and out of divine dust, and if we are indeed connected to everything else in the universe, then we are not simply God's emissaries here on earth to be co-creators with God like we discussed a couple of weeks ago. We ourselves are intricately woven into the fabric of God's divine creation. And that in taking care of it, we are also taking care of ourselves. We are a part of the universe. We are in it, and it is in us. Have you ever been in one of those moments when you knew in the deepest part of your being, down in the farthest reaches of your soul, that this is true? that you are a part of all of it and it is a part of you? Do you know a moment like that? Have you had one of those moments? Those moments where you don't just see the beauty of creation, but you feel it in your bones. I was sitting high above Kings Canyon. Kings Canyon National Park sits inside of Sequoia National Park, and Ryan and the kids and I had hiked up to the top of this point, and I sat there overwhelmed by all I was looking at, but at the same time, I was also overwhelmed by the intimacy of the divine that I felt in those moments as I breathed in the air. And after that climb, I should have been exhausted, but I was exhilarated. I felt so alive sitting on that rock high above that ancient canyon. I felt so connected to that place. And even now, thousands of miles away, I see that picture and it takes me back there, and I know that I still am connected. It was a moment of divine energy. One of those moments where you are alive. Unfortunately, I had the opposite reaction, not very far from the first picture. This is Stump Meadow, a part of Stump Meadow in Sequoia National Park. And as I entered this meadow, I began to cry. My soul ached. I physically felt sick because of seeing this great tragedy of how we have damaged our brother trees. I wept at how we had murdered these ancient treasures. And as I stood there next to these giant stumps, these trees that literally had been cut off at the knees, I knew John Muir's words to be true. John Muir, who loved these ancient trees and said, God has cared for these trees, saved them from drought, disease, avalanche, and 1,000 tempests and floods. But God could not save them from fools. We don't have to be in a faraway place, in a sacred national park, protected. We can be right here, seeing a beautiful Missouri sunset, something so beautiful that makes you stop. I was at my grandparents' farm in Warrensburg. I had come home from my first semester of seminary, living in the big city of Dallas-Fort Worth, and I stood out just before this picture was taken, and my daddy came out and stood next to me. And he says, "Sis, are you all right?" And I gave him one of these, and I said, "Be still." Sometimes he talks too much. I said, "Be still. I'm smelling the dirt. I'm smelling the dirt, the life-giving dirt that provided my family its livelihood for generations." When I think of that story, I always think of this line from Thoreau: heaven is under our feet as well as over our heads, stardust. In that beautiful black Missouri dirt. And when we see and know God in all of these gloriously divine moments, how can we not want to take care of that beauty? Brother trees, sister sky, for my grandchildren, for the grandchildren of these small people that we love and cherish. And sometimes it can seem so overwhelming. We are not big oil. We are not great logging. We benefit from big oil and from logging and from water polluters. But there are things, everyday, ordinary things that you and I can do to make a difference. And today, I'm going to help you with one. Because we have to start somewhere. A few weeks ago, I was driving through Parkville. Some of you know we live in Parkville. And I was driving through Parkville, and I started noticing plastic grocery bags. And there were a lot of them. And so I started counting. And quarter, maybe half a mile, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention because I was too busy at seeing the plastic grocery bags flying their wave of litter. I got distracted, but there were at least 5 in just a short stretch in these trees that were trying to bloom and bud and make their leaves. And here were these plastic grocery bags blowing in the wind. Now, I'm especially drawn to the plastic grocery bags because I became used to not seeing them in Southern California. Several years ago, Los Angeles banned them entirely. You can't get them at all because they blow into the ocean. And little fish get caught in them, and big fish try to eat them. And so you either have to buy a paper bag from the gal at Hy-Vee, or you have to take your own. Now, here, we still have plastic grocery bags, and that's okay. But sometimes the high school kid, no offense to the high school kids, you guys are doing a good job, but the high school kid sacking bags at Price Chopper uses a few too many grocery bags for my liking, right? I see you nodding, right? Because sometimes you have like 8 items and you come home with 10 grocery bags. I don't know how it happens, but they just keep multiplying, right? Some of you know what I mean. Okay, so let's think about this. Let's use, because I like round numbers, 10 plastic grocery bags. And you only go once a week, because you don't live at my house, because we go more than once a week and we would go through more than 10 plastic grocery bags. But for argument's sake, you go once a week, 10 plastic grocery bags. That's 520 plastic grocery bags a year. Gage, keep me honest on my math, okay? 520 plastic grocery bags just for me if that was all I actually used. Now, we're going to, again, keep our numbers round and say there are 100 of us here. There are more than 100 of us here, but we're going to say there are 100 of us here. 100 of us at 520 plastic grocery bags. Maybe that's too complicated of a math, so I did it for us. That's over 52,000 plastic grocery bags to get caught in the trees and blow in the wind. And unless you intentionally take them back to Hy-Vee and recycle them, they are scattered all over the plains of Kansas until the western wind blows them into Missouri. And so, in my trunk and in the back of Ryan's bag, or the back of Ryan's van, we have a plethora of canvas grocery bags. Anybody else have this problem? Canvas grocery bags. Yes, oh, I'm so glad there are others of you. Canvas, because if you don't have enough, you end up at Hy-Vee or Price Chopper or wherever you shop without your plastic grocery bags, and then you've got your 10 grocery bags for your 8 items. And if you don't have canvas grocery bags covering the trunk of your car, I am here to begin that problem for you. this is my Oprah moment. Because I have presents. And so, you get a bag. And 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 everybody gets a bag. I don't have paid interns who are going to come down the aisle like Oprah would and give you all a Community Christian Church bag, but I have servers who will give them to you as you leave this morning. This is our one little thing. We can't fix it all, but one little thing at a time, one canvas grocery bag at a time, maybe we can begin to do our part. Because we are all connected. You and me, biologically. Us and the earth, chemically. And we talk a lot about community and taking care of one another. And since September, we've been talking a lot about community matters. Well, Mother Earth and all of her creatures are our community too. And so on this Earth Day, as we lead into this week, as we celebrate Earth Day, may we use our plastic bag, our canvas bags to remind us that every day is Earth Day, to use the cliche. Every day is Earth Day. And may it remind us of our divine responsibility to care for ourselves and for our planet. Because as the family of God, Mother Earth, Father Sky, and all of their children, we need one another. We need one another. May it be so. May it be so for us.